everyone. I'm gonna talk about my master's about estimating the cost of predation in otariid seals. I would like to introduce briefly what predation is, the threats that surround predation. It's important to keep in mind that in order to assure its survival, an individual depends on a successful partitioning of energy between its parallel activities, such as foraging, reproduction, or protection from predators. When we talk about anti-predatory responses, we normally divide it between direct anti-predatory responses and indirect. A typical example of a direct anti-predatory response could be to actively counterattack a predator. Highly effective, but is also very energetic, expensive, and can jeopardize an individual total energetic budget. While other indirect anti-predatory responses, such as vigilance, are very cost-effective, as they allow individuals to be involved in other activities at the same time. However, it still reduces the total efficiency of the individual. So in order to compensate that, individuals form groups with conspecific, as we can see in Pallas. I mean, there are not many of them, but you can see that while one is feeding, the other one is being vigilant for potential predators, or select safe habitats. What we can see with this small red squirrel that is sort of hidden in this trunk to protect from potential predators. The energetic cost of anti-predatory responses also vary greatly between species, depending mostly on the characteristics of both prey and predator, as well as the type of environment. Such is the case of the open ocean, where the availability of shelter is really reduced in comparison to the terrestrial environment. So animals are normally experiment predation coming from every direction. Such is the case as the object of this study, pinnipeds and more specific otariid seals, that despite of being mesopredators themselves are still at risk of predation. It's rather interesting because otariid seals still feed during lactation, so they form breeding colonies where they venture out to sea to feed and then come back, and these breeding colonies host the segregation of animals that inevitably attract predators. And the most characteristic one, killer whales, sharks, and even other species of pinnipeds. Therefore, some anti-predatory responses have been observed. Some animals are known to increase their group size and use natural refuge in the presence of predators, while others hug the seafloor when leaving, returning to the colony to avoid predators. Nevertheless, despite all this knowledge, anti-predatory responses in the open ocean remain largely unknown due to the cryptic nature of foraging marine animals. An interesting behavior has been recently identified, that is rolling. It is known to be used for some marine mammals, such as dolphins, to better detect prey and predators. This behavior has been recently identified as well in lure for seals, and it's been hypothesized that it can be used as a means to be vigilant for potential predators within the water column. However, its prevalence and cause in otariid seals remain largely unknown. Therefore, the aims of this study were to determine the incidence of rolling behavior, factors influencing it, and estimating its potential energetic cost. In order to do so, we analyzed data from 3 species of fur seals and 3 species of sea lion, ranging different body size, ranging moves, habitats, and potential predators. Within the species of this study, Australian sea lions and southern sea lions can be considered species of big size within otariids, with a predominant foraging benthic mood. That means that the foraging zone normally corresponds with the seafloor, and animals spend a long time foraging at the bottom of the dive. Galapagos sea lions and key-fur seals are species of medium size within otariids. A recent study, I think it was published in 2019, identified Galapagos sea lions as mixed foragers, what means that they use a variety of diving moves. They incorporate a variety of diving moves to their foraging trips. Cape seals, they're normally being categorized as epipelagic, but a study came around last year in which it identified these 4 types of dive. They're still predominantly pelagic, but some individuals include benthic dives to their trips, being even this kind of dives predominant. Northern fur seals and South American fur seals are both species of small size within otariids and are mainly epipelagic divers. The data collection process consisted on targeting at random female nursing pups in the breeding colonies, which then were anesthetized. Once under the anesthesia effect, individuals with weight and morphometric measures were taken. Then individuals were instrumented, in which a triaxial accelerometer data log was placed either on the head or between the scapula. It measures the three-dimensional location of the animal in the water column. So we have three axes: the AX heave, AI sway, and AZ surge. Then a behavioral data logger that records depth, as well as other factors. Or external temperature was placed between the scapulas as well. A GPS data logger and a VH radio transmitter that helped in the relocation process. Then all this data was uploaded to the software Eagle Pro when data was set correct and data from the different devices was visually aligned. Dive cycle phases would mean descent, bottom, descent, and surface period were individually masked, and then roll index was estimated. We estimate that because in order to account for incomplete rotations that were not given for the roll angle. An incomplete rotation will consist of the animal turning less than 316 degrees in one direction and then less than 316 degrees in another direction, which is in the lateral accelerometer axis, this sort of pattern, while a complete rotation will consist of degree just in one direction, and it will leave this sort of pattern. Then vectorial dynamic body acceleration was also calculated in also to assess the energetic consequences of rolling. That would be the typical profile on Eagle Pro. I also studied more factors, but those are the main important ones. That's the depth profile of the animal. These are the three axes of the accelerometer data logger. That's the roll angle. And then these are the following steps used to calculate the roll index that I mentioned before. These are the different dive cycle phases. And we can see that for each cycle phases, each way adopts sort of a different profile. Then I'll explain why when it's necessary to take into account the different phases of the dive. The results of this study indicate that fur seals took on average trips of longer duration than cynians, in which they undertook a greater number of times. Mean maximum depths vary among species, presumably according to the bathymetry of each sampling site, as well as the foraging characteristics of each species. With regards to diving behavior, a generalized mixed addictive model was calculated to explore temporal variation, dive frequency. We found that Australian sea lions and southern sea lions dive at all times of the day with little diurnal variation, while Galapagos sea lions and Cape Verde seals dive all day showing highest frequency at 9 times, when the conditions are ready for epipelagic dives to take place. North fur seals and South American fur seals dive mainly, they mainly at 9 times show displaying very little activity during the day hours. Then with regards to the rolling activity, we also found that mean rolling index values vary during the different dive cycle values taking place either at the surface or the bottom. GAMs were also created to study temporal variation in rolling. And it was found that for Australian sea lions, Galapagos sea lions, southern sea lions, and Cape Verde seals, rolling activity was rated for the crepuscular hours for most species. While for northern fur seals, the rolling activity was rated at 9 times, and for South American fur seals, rolling activity was rated during the day. Preliminary studies have suggested that there was some variation in surface roll behavior at different depths. So in order to assess that question, interdive intervals often having taken trips of less than 10 meters in waters of less than 10 meters or more than 10 meters were compared by using a student t-test. The results show that Australian sea lions, southern sea lions, and northern seals, while for Galapagos sea lions and Cape seals, role was higher after undertaking trips in shallow waters, and no substantial difference were found in South American fur seals. With regards to the energetic cause of rolling, linear mix effect models were created, and we found that there was a positive relationship between roll and bedba. For any roll index value, bedba was rated at the surface for Australian sea lions, Galapagos sea lions, Cape seals, and Norfolk seals, while for southern sea lions, at low roll index value, bedba was rated during the surface phase, while for high roll index value, bedba was rated during the bottom phase. And there were no significant differences in roll index values for South American fur seals. Putting all together and checking with previous literature, we can conclude that the mean depths and dive behaviors of the individuals in this study were characteristics of the species. As I mentioned before, Australian sea lions, southern sea lions, Galapagos sea lions, and Cape seal display peaks in rolling activity at sunset. For Australian sea lions and southern sea lions, this rolling activity was rated at the surface. Most attacks towards otariids have been recurred, while for Galapagos sea lions and Cape seals, rolling behavior was rated during the bottom phase. That is quite interesting because, as I mentioned before, benthic divers are normally protected from predatory attacks coming from below, as they're already at the seafloor, while epipelagic divers, and we know that both species undertake a certain amount of epipelagic dives, can still fear an attack coming from below. Definitely with this crepuscular pattern, a recent study has observed that sharks display radar activity during the crepuscular hours, and it has suggested that sharks may benefit from the reduced light conditions to target otariid, their prey in general, but in particular otariid seals. With regards to northward seals and South American fur seals, rolling activity did not follow a crepuscular pattern. However, its higher activity was displayed at the surface, where individuals were not involved in feeding activities. Also interesting, it seems that both populations study in this study of northward seals and South American fur seals seem to have experienced greater predation pressure by killer whales during the last decade, and killer whales are not followed by diurnal patterns, so it might be a relation there. Also, with regards to surface roll behavior, as I mentioned before, Australian sea lions, southern sea lions, and northern seals display a highest rolling activity after taking dives in deep waters, which can be interpreted as that, contrary to the beloved idea that most attacks towards otariid they always place at the surface, these individuals may still fear an attack when they dive in deep waters. However, as the analysis was a bit precarious, I will say further analysis needed to confirm such theory. Well, with regards to the energetic implication of roll behavior, Jenna Fulvio et al. In 2017, they found that for specific activity patches, bedba was linear to metabolic rate, which means that an increase in bedba would be translated to an increase in metabolic rate. As we found that for all the species of this study, there was a positive roll index at bedba, we assume that increase in rolling will be translated in metabolic activity. Also, as I mentioned before, the fact that for most species rolling was rated at the surface, and that this pattern was sort of similar in the other phases, indicate that these individuals may use rolling as a means for vigilance. However, this study does not exclude at all the possibility of otariid seals use rolling for other purposes, as it will be optimizing prey encounters in the water column. Just to finish with what will be the potential threat of otariid populations, we know that predator abundance has a role in regulating prey populations. Within otariid seals is rather interesting because fur seals population have increased since the banning of sealing, while sea lions population have either remained stable or decreased. It is also known that climate change in some areas will lead to an increase in predation pressure, as it will be probably the case of in South African waters and Australian waters, will lead to more presence of sharks in this area, while other species as the tropical Galapagos lions or the study population here of high temperate South American fur seals are particularly susceptible to El Niño events. Well, in conclusion, this study supports the idea of role and behavior being used by otariid seals as a means for vigilance, and this behavior implies additional energetic costs. Patterns in role and behavior seem to be related to the characteristic of a species and their potential predators rather than to the type of environment. However, to confirm such tendency, a further analysis is needed, including various populations and times of the year within the same species. In order to assess inter-individual variations, subsamples should be taken within populations, considering different body size, ages, and sex. And thank you very much for your attention.